Well, I'm going to get to our first speaker. As we were planning the program, we all thought the perfect person to get us started is Ed Amoroso. And, not to get too dramatic on you, but I'd really say Ed is one of the pioneers in our space. Ed was the first CISO at AT&T years ago, maybe one of the first in the world, I think. He's done a lot of consulting with governments on cyber policy. He's a distinguished professor here at NYU in the city, and he works with a lot of industry at the firm he founded, Tag Infosphere. So welcome Dr. Ed Amoroso onto the stage, please. Ed. Thank you.
A little ditty about New York.
Hi, guys. So first off, if any of you have kids that are considering careers, like I bet a bunch of you do, let me start with some advice. I think that what you should tell them is that if they're looking for a career in tech, the right kind of major they should be thinking about would be philosophy. And I'm not kidding. When I was an undergrad and a graduate student, cybersecurity wasn't really even a thing, and I've devoted my life to something that didn't exist while I was in school. And you would have said I had like 3 heads if I said I was going to go do enterprise cybersecurity. What is that? I really think that interdisciplinary approaches to technical problems are the right way to do things. And this problem, I'm so glad that Rohit asked that I address this. I'm going to give you a little taste of how you would approach this problem in an interdisciplinary way. Because I bet a bunch of you are gearheads like me, engineers. So the way an engineer would approach this is, have we strengthened? We gone too far? Well, let me give you 5 reasons why we have. Boom, 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 and then we'd be done. And then we go, oh, that makes perfect sense. And we would all agree. And I don't think that's the way we're going to be doing things in the future. I mean, AI, in some sense, is going to do the easy part, and it's going to be for us to do the hard part. So what you're going to get now is a lot of meandering. That's one thing I think, when I went to an undergraduate school, you'll see Elena later, she and I both went to Dickinson College, I'm going to even show you a picture of it, where you learned, meander's a funny verb to use when you're an engineer, because we don't do that. We usually yell at members of our team when they meander. Come on, get to the point, what's the answer? Whereas I think we're entering an era where a little bit of meandering is good. So what I'm going to do is take you on this little crazy little journey around physics and math and engineering and business, and then come to the end, and then we'll ask this question, and I think you'll answer it for yourself. You decide. I think that's the era that your kids will live in. They'll live in a time when it's not what's the answer, but what is your opinion? Because we can get an answer quickly from a piece of technology that'll tell you what are 5 reasons, I should be doing a conference in New York? Well, boom, 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 boom. I don't need you to tell me that. I need something more than that. So if you'll stick with me as we go through this, I'll take you on this crazy sort of interdisciplinary trip, and then we'll come back. I'll try and leave a few minutes, and you guys tell me what you think. Maybe we shift a little too far right, and the whole shift left, right thing. We're good at that in cyber, making these little mnemonic devices that reference what we're doing so that we can talk to executives about our goals. So the first piece is what's in physics. We'll start with physics. What's been the impact? You'd be surprised how much it's impacted not just computing, but computer science, and in particular cybersecurity. So we'll talk about that. But this is where I studied physics as an undergrad. That's Dickinson College. How would you like to study physics there? Doesn't that look like a place you should study physics? A small place. And we learned, sort of the basics of, this topic that's been around for a while. I got lucky. My dad was an early computer scientist. He had the 2nd PhD in computer science in the whole world. And in '83, when I graduated, I said, I remember my senior project was all software, and my advisor was like, I got good news and bad news for you. I'm like, what's the bad news? Well, the bad news is you really suck as a physicist. And I go, yeah, I kind of know that. They go, well, what's the good news? Well, you look like you're really born to be a computer scientist. And I said, yeah, my dad, the whole thing. So I went into computing and joined Bell Labs. But my dad, in '83, he said, you know what? I think this thing computer security is going to be a big thing, and you should go do that. So I joined the security group, the Unix security group at Bell Labs. My dad, I mean, it wasn't by accident. It's amazing how much influence you have on young people when you give them advice. Be careful with your advice, like that philosophy thing. I do think that's real. I think that's real advice. Someday, if one of you tells maybe some young person, I think you should study philosophy if you want to be the next, whatever, Bill Gates. And they actually do that, they'll be standing up here saying, hey, you know what, I had a major hint. I know nobody knew to go into philosophy, but I had this cousin, uncle, mom, or whatever, who said, hey, go into philosophy. I did that. And now we all know, every company has a chief philosophy officer, whereas back in 2024, there was no such thing. And you chuckle, but I guarantee you there'll be a chief philosophy officer in every company. Like, think back automobiles, when you hop in your autonomous vehicle, and it's your first time and you're setting it up, it's going to be like, well, first question, if I have to decide to kill the bystander or kill you, which is it? Because I'm not going to decide. And you pick kill them or kill me. Like those will be decisions you'll make at config time with your autonomous vehicle. So physics was my base. And this was the first thing that we all sort of learned. We looked at this picture that is basically a DEI nightmare, right? I mean, you say it's like one female. And by the way, the female is, I hope, it's Madame Curie. But all the names there, all the constants. There's Einstein. And if you're a Breaking Bad fan, you can find Heisenberg up there. But so they're all white males. If you'd say this is the most amazing collection of genius maybe ever assembled for a picture. But the fact that there's no people of color, no women, means it could have actually been better. Maybe we'd be living on Mars had we been a little bit more diverse at the time. But whatever, we are. Here's the reason I bring this up. From 1890 to 1930, these people drove invention. We changed the word for some reason. Like the marketing people got a hold of invention and said, innovation sounds better. I'm not sure why, but I think it's sort of the same thing. But they wouldn't have said innovation. They wouldn't even know what you're talking about. But they were inventors. And for 40 years, they invented stuff. Like that guy in the middle wrote 3 papers in 1905. It was like all of them could win a Nobel Prize. None of them did because he pissed off all the physicists, kind of going after quantum, but whatever. By the way, if you love all that, then that's the joy of physics. And that's the joy of interdisciplinary, when you learn to kind of get the background story and realize people and science, they all go together. It's quite exciting. But here's the point. That group, through their invention, had 2 outcomes. One is a great one, like computing and electrification and so on. But the other is this. Oh, I was going to show you. I don't have the picture here, but it's Roosevelt writing a letter to, or Einstein writing a letter to Roosevelt saying, we could have like this terrible bomb, right? We better build something. The Germans are doing this and that. You get the point. So what happened from all of that is a generation of people really went into physics. This is somebody I had a chance to meet last year. We spent a little time together. It's Tim Berners-Lee. He's the inventor of the World Wide Web. Physicist, working at CERN. And the reason I bring this up is because that physics sensibility was brought to computing. And I want to show you what that is in a minute. I'm going to show you another picture. There's another physicist, Cliff Stoll, you might remember, from the 80s, who was a physicist who became kind of this cybersecurity guru. I remember there's a conference in Baltimore we used to have called the NCSC conference, one of the first places I used to publish. They got rid of it. But I was in a conference talk where there were 3 people and some crippy doing math on a board. And there was a thin wall, and I could hear on the other side of the wall, they were having a hell of a good time, like loud, laughing, like almost like a big party there, and you're stuck here with some crippy you barely understand. So somehow I got up. I think it was really embarrassing. Noticed I walked out and I went out, and that guy is standing on a table in a wizard's robe, jumping around and running around, having all kinds of fun. He's a physicist who became a computer scientist because he couldn't get a job as a physicist. But he could get a job in this budding industry called computing. about my age. I don't know that he had a dad who said go into computing. I did. But we all went into it around the same time. And the sensibility from the perspective of the physicist is a little different than in computing. Like, this is what the astronomer sees. An astronomer lays on the ground and looks up, and there's all these stars and stuff, and you map them and you write them. What they wish they could do, but are trained that you can't do, is you can't move any of that stuff. It is what it is. If you're religious, you say God did it. If you're not, you say evolution did it. But you go, I can't do anything about it. So this generation of physicists came to computing believing that there's nothing you can do other than react. Do you follow? An entire generation of people about my age came into this from physics because there was no computer science, really. A few places had it, but most places, like when I was at Dickinson, there's no computer science department. It was physics, math, and you took a few computer courses. So we all came at it having been trained that, well, you know, I know you'd like to move some of those little, but there's nothing you can do. You just lay there and map it and be very reactive. Does everybody follow? That's the backdrop that I think physics brings. Now, what about engineering? So if you think about the sensibility of an engineer, it's a builder. And here's another physicist I used to work with, Bill Cheswick at Bell Labs. I studied physics at Lehigh. My son went there as well. And the sensibility he brought was the sensibility of a builder, an engineer. In 1988, it was the Morris worm. You probably remember that thing bounced around the internet a little bit. He'd been building some little stuff that would look at packets and would stop packets based on the ACK bit if it looked like the destination port was something you didn't want to allow, as a firewall, an early firewall. He was basically called the father of the firewall, Bill Cheswick. But he comes at it from the sensibility of the engineer, and he eventually started building things like this. Now, this is a map, and this is a more modern-looking thing. Do you notice how that kind of looks like the last thing a little bit? A little uglier, like the physicists had these beautiful pictures of what the sky, and we have this shitty-looking thing with these little bubbles and stuff, but it's sort of the same thing. Now, all of us as engineers would look at that, and if somebody said you can't move that, you go, well, the heck you can. You can move that, you can change it. We could break up Google, we could break up Facebook, we could do whatever, we're moving them around, get rid of them, change it. It's a completely different sensibility than what you had from a physics perspective. The first group says, can't move it. Sounds a little shift righty. This group says, of course you can move it. We built this. You just rewire it. Like sometimes you get people debating AI, and you get the ones who go, well, AI is going to kill all of us. Like the best analogy I ever heard, Sam Harris says, if dogs invented us to make their lives better, was that a good decision? And we would go, for the most part, yes. If you're a dog owner, you think, doggone it, that was a pretty good idea for dogs to invent us to make their lives better. But like if dogs got some weird, dog to human disease, we'd wipe them all out in 1 second. You can think maybe AI is like that too, like we invent AI to make our lives better, but God forbid we were a threat to them, they'd wipe us out, whatever. There's that group, and then there's the group that says just pull the plug. Now I think it's a little harder to pull the plug, like that's, you get a lot of pundits on the internet who'll say, well, just pull the plug. But at any rate, that shift left, shift right. Do you see how instead of coming at this directly, when you look at physics and you look at engineering, you think, yeah, there's definitely something there. It can help me decide which makes more sense, which is a better argument. Now this guy, Henry Petrosky, he died a little while ago. One of my favorite engineers, because he studied failure. He wrote these beautiful books about the engineering and design of things that fail. He also wrote a book about pencils, which you should totally buy, because a pencil is this magnificent act of engineering achievement. If you really look at how a pencil works, it's amazing. But he's the guy who studied Tacoma Narrows. I hate to put that up, because I'm actually driving to Baltimore in a few days, and I guess I'll go around the bridge that fell. But he's the guy who said, listen, when you do build things, when we decide we're going to be, creating structure and creating infrastructure and creating systems that we depend on, there's an obligation. Like the physicists don't feel the obligation. A physicist is not going to feel blame if a solar flare causes some weird thing to our climate. They're going to say, well, it is what it is, don't blame me. But an engineer does feel blame when that thing goes down. That's not an act of God, as you'd call a reliability thing. That's an act of an engineer, right? That means we built it and it broke. So that's one of these, whoa, what do I think there? So I do think that not just there's things I can build, but I have an obligation when I am building. So it gives you that first little hint that, wow, there is something to ounce of prevention, the obvious sort of things that your mom and your kids would totally get. So it's so funny how that kind of plays a role. Now let's talk about math, because this is one of the more interesting things. This is, on the left, that's Edgar Dijkstra, and that's his wife. In the 50s, he started to reason about how computing should move. This is the Albert Einstein, in my mind, of computing, but he hated AI. Like right around the time this picture was taken, John von Neumann was dying. He was in the Manhattan Project, got cancer, and he was developing the Silliman lectures at Princeton. It was a book, and he really wanted to write this book, and he called it The Computer and the Brain. And in the book, he argues, or makes the case for neural networks. If you've never seen the book, you can get it for about 15 cents on Amazon, because nobody recognizes how amazing it is. And it's a sad book, because he dies in the book. He's writing it, like you read the foreword, it's from his wife, and she goes, oh, Johnny wanted to write this so bad. And the beginning, he's laying out the basis for neural networks, and then it tails off at the end, and you go, oh my gosh, I've never cried in a math book. But it's like, whoa, this is so interesting. And here's another thing we get wrong as computer scientists. And trust me, it's been my whole career teaching and doing computer science. We think that 5 minutes ago is enough ancient history that I don't want to talk about it anymore. Like notice I showed a bunch of pictures from the past. That's not usually the case at cybersecurity conferences where you see pictures of the past, other than to ridicule Microsoft Word 3.1, like, oh my God, that was like the Neanderthal years. One of my favorite books on my shelf is called The Alta Vista Revolution. It was a book that was written and published a few months before Google was invented. And they talked about how they were going to take over search and change the world. How do you not want to read that and see, what were they saying? Like, where did they go wrong? How did they became extinct from something that beat them. Don't you want to see what they got wrong? Like, bottom line is they built this big, ugly portal, whereas Google built this simple, clean interface for just asking a question, and it kicked their butt. And the algorithm's a little better, too, but I think it's more the interface. If you don't read that, you don't get it. You don't go back and look at history. You don't get it, which is why your kids should study philosophy, not computer science. They should take computer science classes, but major in philosophy. So this guy became part of a room in 1968. My dad was in that room. But there's Dijkstra, there's Tony Hoare, Alan Perlis. That's the analog of that picture I showed you from the Solvay conference with all the physicists. Notice also a diversity nightmare there too. A bunch of white males, no females, no people of color. It's unbelievable how people say, does the world bend in the arc of things being more reasonable? I think generally it does, but that's stark. But at any rate, they invented the phrase software engineering at that conference, 1968. Add 40 years to that, and you got Steve Jobs on a stage holding up iPhone 1, and me behind the scenes at AT&T freaking out trying to support the identity work in support of that launch. We were using IBM, a hacked version of Tim Tam. Do you guys remember Tim from IBM? It was this very early kind of stuff that was T for Tivoli. So that's what we did the iPhone launches with, that software. And it was tough. We got through it. But at any rate, add 40 years, you get, so question, from 1968 to 2008, these guys, they did things that had two outcomes, right? One outcome is all the wonder of cloud and AI, all the beautiful stuff we do. And the bad part is what Rohit and all of us do, and that's cybersecurity. Here's a question for you. Because again, this is more about you thinking than me giving you an answer. And I have asked ChatGPT this question, it gives a dumb answer. Which do you think was more consequential to the world we live in for your children? 1890 to 1930, all those physicists, and you knew every damn one of them, or in 1968 to 2008 with a bunch of these guys, and you can't name a single face there? Which has had more impact on the world? I think these guys would make Gutenberg blush. Think about what they did. Like get rid of books, kind of, get rid of, change everything. The whole, kind of addicted all of our kids to this damn social media. I'm not crazy about that. But the impact that they've had on the world, you could make the case exceeds the impact that those great physicists had. Isn't that interesting? So mathematics, this is a guy, David Grease, who said, that's the way you do software. You program proof. I did my PhD in that area. And I'll tell you what, it ain't fun, man. Writing invariants and proving that hasn't worked out. I had a copy of his book that got misprinted, and the cover was backwards to the book. And I showed him, he's a professor at Cornell, and I lived in Ithaca. In 8th grade, my dad did a sabbatical there. I used to run around with his kids. But I showed him the book, and he goes, could I have this? And I went, no, because I thought it would be worth something eventually. I made a joke. He was okay with me keeping it. But I still have on my shelf that book. But that's what we thought in kind of the 90s and 2000s was the way we would shift left. We'd just program prove everything, right? And that, I was using a tool called Gypsy from UT Austin, and all these program theorem provers. Oh my God, they're clunky, they didn't work. And it made us depressed enough that I think it caused a little bit of shift right with programmers. Programmers are like, I don't want to do this. I got to do all that stupid math. It's hard enough to get the code right. I got to get all the math right. So it did cause a problem. So around all this time, we started seeing hacks. We started seeing some significant hacks. And this is the one I referenced earlier. That's Bob Morris Jr. The guy on the right, Bob Morris Sr., was my boss at Bell Labs when this all happened. And it was a little piece of code that he wrote that took the internet down, freaked everybody out. And we all went, whoa, it doesn't take much to take a lot of things down. This is, as physicists, this would be like somebody putting a little balloon, letting it go up, and it realigns all the stars. And you go, wait, what did you do? A little weather balloon went up, and it messes up the whole sky. It freaked us out. And we started seeing a few years later, that's a picture of the SQL slammer worm, where it's a picture, it's a log scale, it's an exponential going up, but from left to right, that's capturing it's UDP traffic, UDP port 1434 if you care, every hour capturing the traffic. And this is somebody trying the attack. That's January 1st, 2013, or no, 2003. They tried the attack, tried it again, tried it again, tried it again, and this time it worked. So we kind of watched them trying it. But again, from an interdisciplinary perspective, we're going, a little thing, you set a little match, you can burn the whole field down. This is terrible. This is different. The physicists going, huh? The mathematicians going, huh? Everybody just kind of going, what? What is this? And this is the time myself and a lot of people my age, Phil Venable's been a lifelong friend, a lot of people like that, Jim Routh, we're about the same age. And we all came to this as this was going on, and we created this discipline of enterprise security. I was the second CISO in the industry. My good friend Steve Katz passed away recently. He and I used to consult together when I retired, and we had this thing where we go, hey, hire the first and second CISO. We got a lot of business from that, that marketing shtick that seemed to play. But he passed away, so now I carry the burden there. So that brought us to this thing, which is oh God. I remember after Slammer, here's what would happen. In those days, a lot of you look like you sort of share a generation with me, so you remember this. You didn't patch every time they had a patch. You're like, what are you kidding me? Patches would break stuff. You put a patch in, and then you got a memory leak that's worse than the patch you put in. You'd be like, what? So you'd wait. You'd batch them up, and then like a service pack or whatever they were calling it then would come out. You'd patch once in a while. I mean, the stuff was crap. So when that SQL came up, we're all in front of our boards getting yelled at, because I was a CISO then, and I'm in front of a big scary board, and they're going, so let me get this right. Microsoft told us, throwing us under the bus, by the way, we told you about this problem 5 months ago, and you didn't patch it. And you go, yeah, we don't. Well, why don't you patch? And guess what? After that, we all became super patchers and decided, I'm pretty sure I hate this. I had a quote. My first time I ever got a quote on the New York Times front page of their business section, it says, Chief Security Ed Amoroso says, most companies spend minimum $1 million a year on patching. And now you would go, yeah, probably more than that. But at the time, that was a big statement. And we got a lot of blowback from Microsoft going, what are you talking about? This is going to blow over. Pretty soon you won't have to do anything. And it's like, yeah, how's that worked out? But that was the beginning. It was that 2003 worm. So again, for all of us, we're going, what is this? Like, what do you do? The mathematicians say program prove. The physicists lay on a hill and just respond. You can't do anything. The computer scientists going, well, maybe I don't know. Everybody has all their perspective, which brings me to the business people. And oh, Maron, what a problem this has been with the business community. So let's start with, those are all the investments made in startups in 2003. We saw a similar bump in 2019, 20, and 21 for cybersecurity companies. The VCs seem to have a big pocketbook. Now I see that in AI. I'll give you an example. AI for healthcare, just that one little vertical, and I count 100 verticals. We have a sister agency at TAG, where I'm a CEO of a research and advisory company. We do cyber, but in AI, we do AI and we do climate science. We picked 3 things that I thought matter to your kids. But in AI, just in AI for healthcare, 1,500 startups in the last 3 or 4 years at a clip of just under $40 billion of investment. So that's the money being thrown into AI now. So the business community is all about money. And then you get guys like that. Now, I have no beef with him, but they say stuff like this. Ready, fire, aim, man. And you go to these motivational business conferences. I went to Columbia Business School, so we would have people like this come and talk to all of us. And they go, just do it, man. Go, you gotta do it. Go, go. What are you slowing down for, man? Losers, slow down. Go, ready, fire, aim. And I'm sitting there going, ready, fire, aim. Really? And then this thing got invented, DevOps. Now, I'm kind of a hip guy. I'm a software engineer. I teach in a university where there's young people doing stuff, and I write about DevOps and CI/CD, and that's the way to go. But if you don't do it safely, you're just going faster. Like there's a way to, if you go, hey, I'm in the car, and I'm going 60, but man, we have to get there faster, so I'm going to do 90. So is that a good idea? I mean, maybe if you go, well, quickly, let's turn this into a tank. If you could do that, then maybe that's a little safer. I know you can't do that, but I'm just saying, you can't just go faster to go faster. Now, automation helps, and Rohit and his team, I'll get to where I think they fit in, because I think there's a fundamental role here that I've seen in SD Elements and in Security Compass since we've known each other. But this idea of go faster is okay if you know what you're doing. And we call it DevSecOps. I don't think, I'm on a crusade to get the sec out of DevSecOps, because it implies that there's a thing that's not DevSecOps, which seems wrong to me, right? Like, I don't like that, like when you do DSPM, Data Security Posture Management, and then somebody goes, oh, I do CDSPM, do cloud. I go, oh, and then everything else I don't care about? And you go, no, well, no, you do. Well, then don't say cloud, just say data. So I think we do DevOps. And again, I know in my writing I say DevSecOps so people know what I'm saying, or security and CI/CD. But I hope over the next few years, maybe Rohit, you and I can become ambassadors saying, look, DevOps needs to be secure. We don't need to say secure, it's redundant. But at any rate, this is what the business community kind of drove. They created a problem. And this is Dennis Ritchie. This is the guy who was the inventor of Unix. Here's a sad thing. He died right around the same time as Steve Jobs. And the articles in mainstream press were like 200 to 1 covering Steve Jobs over the guy who invented Unix. Like, give me a break. Like, who had more impact? I don't know. Maybe the marketing guy had a lot of impact. But I think the guy who invented the technology that drives your iPhones, that drives Linux, that drives even Windows. Here's a funny story about Windows. It's proprietary, right? But a woman named Helen Custer, by accident, got a job there and wrote a book called Inside Windows NT. Inside Windows NT, it was. And she published it, and I bought it immediately because I would devour operating systems books. And then I noticed it got pulled from the shelf because I'm reading it, and I'm going, this is Windows internals. So she spilled the beans. And what's at the root of it? Something they were calling POSIX, which is Unix. So, I mean, if you work in the intelligence community or DoD, they've already shown you that. But that's not something generally known. So this guy is at the root of everything. And you know what he said? He said the way to do software is you do it carefully. You know, you do it carefully. Elegance, simplicity, you know, care. This is a shift left guy. You know, he's saying, take the time to do it right and do it in small pieces. But he created this concept called software tools. Bill Plowger, you might know, wrote a book called Software Tools in the old days, we all had those books. But it was to do things right. So there's this fundamental inconsistency between ready, fire, aim, losers go slow, you know, all that business stuff. And then a guy who's probably the most influential technologist, I would argue maybe whoever lived. Remember I showed you the 1968 to 2008? What's the flagship achievement of that? Well, Unix. Who was president when Unix was invented? Lyndon Johnson. So his thing, invented when Lyndon Johnson came up, is the most amazing computing experiment / project / development effort ever. And his Turing Award address, where he talks about the research environment at Bell Labs where I grew up, he basically says, you got to go slow. In an exact quote, I'm going to paraphrase it for you, but he says, one of the biggest dangers is if something becomes too commercially relevant, that's really bad. And I thought, wow, what an amazing statement from somebody we should be listening to. Which brings me to this guy, Charlie Miller, greatest hacker, I think, alive right now. A little bit of a beef when he hacked that van in St. Louis. You know that story, the Wired magazine reporter gets in the car, and they show that you can hijack a car, but they did it on a live highway, and I blogged about it going, come on, man, like that could be my daughter driving behind you. Do it on a track, for God's sake. You're doing it on, they like stopped the car, drove it off all kinds of stuff on a live highway. But he has an easy time with all of us because we've done a sloppy job with our software. I mean, that's just a fact. He'll be the first one to say the way he hacks, the way, and I think he's the best, is his bad software. That's what he would say. Which brings me to the question we started with. This is where we would have started right up front. Now, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you know Rich Powell and I have a cartoon strip called Charlie CISO. And this is one, you can't see it all in there, but it's Charlie at the base of the RSA conferences, vendors who shift left, vendors who shift right. I think they should probably have that up. But I thought that was a real knee slapper. My wife didn't think it was very funny. But here's I think, the epitome of shift right. He's a good friend of mine, George Kurtz. Jersey guy. Grew up, and I remember I bought his FoundScan product. Foundstone was the company. When they first started, I took the IBM stuff out and rolled his thing in, him and Stu McClure. Got to know them, very fine technologists, but he's made a fortune with the DR thing. Notice DR, detect and respond, is a very shift right concept. It's the kind of thing a physicist would approve of. It's like, dude, get over it. You ain't gonna stop anything. What are you gonna go? You gonna stop the foreign military? Good luck with that. Just give up. Come on. Just just will detect and respond. We assume, tell your board that there's nothing you can do. And look, there's some truth to that. I mean, Rohit and all of us would agree. This ain't easy. In fact, my argument to the SEC about the reporting thing, like protecting investors and telling them when there's a problem, I said, and I again blogged about this, I said, why don't we just make a blanket statement from every public company saying, hey, investors, we are all 100% under attack right now, I guarantee it. And if you don't believe me, remember when James Comey was up at the podium saying, making that joke we all get wrong? Remember when George Bush got the fool me once wrong, got that all wrong. So we get this joke wrong. We go, there's two kinds of companies, ones that have gotten hacked and then ones that haven't gotten hacked but know that they, but he's basically saying, everybody's hacked. So if the director of the FBI says everybody's always getting hacked, then why don't we just all tell the SEC, I'm always getting hacked? Like that would be sort of my joke in this context of detection and response. Which brings me to my friend Rohit, who invited me to come speak with you. I saved this for the end because I think that this is a nice complement to, we do have to do detection and response, but I also like what these guys have done. I've been following you guys. I first blogged about you 5, 6, 7 years ago or something. We met and I said, that's a damn good idea. And I knew that eventually we would all come around to what I would consider a basic question, and that's a question for you. Like, right, that's where you can get me. But now I want to hear from you real quickly. Do we have a couple more minutes? Are we okay for a couple more minutes? I don't know if I don't have there's no, 3 minutes. Yeah, we're good. We got 3 minutes. What do you guys think? Like, do I make the case here that, I don't know that there's an answer, but you probably ought to think about it and think like a philosopher and be a little interdisciplinary and then decide. Anybody want to share what you think? Do you think, have we shifted too far here? A little too much of the physics influence? What do you think? When I'm teaching, I always keep candy. I'm going to ask a question. I copied this from Stanford. If you keep a bowl of M&Ms in little bags, and you say, all right, does anybody have any question? Students know that if you go, yeah, I have a question, then you get tossed a bag of M&Ms for being the first one. But I don't have any M&Ms up here. You got any M&Ms?
We have some questions.
Okay, good. Let's hear them.
Yeah, that's good. Well, yeah, thanks, Ed. You're the perfect person to get us started today. I know you'd wake us up. We're going to have questions from the online audience and in the group here. If you have a question, just put your hand up because we have a couple of folks with mics that will run over to the person, and so everybody can hear it online, and then we'll go online as well. So anybody in the room so far? Okay, I see a question over here. If we can get a mic. Go for it.
Hi, Dr. Amoroso.
Just Ed. You can just call me Ed.
Hi, Ed. My name is Joe Valentine. I'm an analyst. What do you think about quantum computing now? What's going on? How do you see quantum taking its effect, or what's the toll of it taking its effect on security?
Yeah, very little, other than the crypto problem, which is big. By the way, do you watch, what's the name of that movie? Is it Black Matter or something like that? You guys know that? Do I have the name of that movie? The Netflix series? Is that what it's called? Yeah. There's one episode where I'm going nuts. My wife is like, oh my God, will you shut up? But they had a quantum computer that like stored all the world's video. They were doing video surveillance of everybody, AI doing all these videos, storing it in a quantum computer. And that's not how quantum computers work. A quantum computer can't even do a read without it being destructive. You're not going to have a quantum laptop. But it just so happens on essentially advice from, guess what? Richard Feynman, the physicist. He noticed that if you've got a lump of matter like phosphorus, and there's these electrons that live on the outside, if you study the physics, you subject that to, I don't remember if it's an electric or magnetic field, probably magnetic field, you can control the spin. And you realize, well, I can have them spin up, or I can spin down, or they could have this superposition state, which is a third possibility, or if there are other electrons, I can entangle them. And he goes, these are states, and if I control this, I could make a computer. So here's a physicist basically suggesting quantum computers. Now that we have them, we realize there's a class of problems they're good for, and lucky us, the you multiply two primes together, that's my secret key, that's how RSA works and Diffie-Hellman work. And if I know one of them, I divide. Well, the factoring of that, which we always assume to be an NP-complete problem, quantum computers using Shor's algorithm, Shor being a mathematician from Bell Labs, they realized, oh my God, we could theoretically break this. Now I'm going to give you all a little bit of, this is a skiff, right? So we can talk classified here? All right. So because this is a skiff, I'll tell you what I think. Here's what I think about quantum, and I hope this is something that you'll think about for the next couple days. Everything we know about the crypto community in the, say, the military and, say, the intelligence community is that they're always about 20 to 30 years ahead of everyone when it comes to crypto. Like when we saw S-boxes in DES for the first time, we went, what is that? And then Diffie and Hellman came up with this differential cryptanalytic approach to try to break it. And we realized that NSA had coded these S-boxes with numbers that optimized against an attack that came 10 years later. Don't screw with the NSA or GCHQ or whatever when it comes to crypto. So now we hear from NIST that we're going to have to worry about store now, decrypt later in a few years, 5, 10 years. And I go, the only people who are going to have quantum computers are the military. Like, is your local bank going to go buy a bunch of them in the? No, of course not. Hackers won't have them either. Someday they will, but in the beginning it'll be, pick the 10 biggest countries that do cyber, they'll all have them. And we combine that with, I can scoop up your ciphertext now and wait to actually do the cryptanalysis. But I said a minute ago, they're always 20 years ahead. So guess what? The quantum threat was probably maybe not 5 years ago, but now you got qubit engines that are big enough. I think the quantum threat, if you worry about it, is right now, this minute. That if somebody's scooping up your ciphertext, there's groups in China and Russia, and pick your favorite countries, Albonia, that's the Dilbert country, that are cryptanalyzing your data right now as we speak. So there's no 5 years from now, it's now. Now, maybe you don't care. If you run a shoe company, who cares? But if you're the National Reconnaissance Office, I think you care. And it's not 5 years from now, it's now. That's why I said skiff. So I don't have an active clearance right now. Full disclosure, used to be on the board at NSA. So I've lived in that world. But I guarantee you that this is not a future problem. It's a problem right now. And then 10 years from now, there'll be like an article in some future version of the New York Times that'll say, wow, we didn't realize it, but way back in 2024, holy crap, we should have really figured that out. They were cryptanalyzing our stuff then. And when you see that, think back to Rohit throwing a party here in Wirral. And I'm telling you now that if you just apply a little bit of logic, you realize, whoa, they're probably doing it now. And all that means is scoop up your data, use standard cryptanalytic break, using Shor's algorithm. You try and cryptanalyze, you make sense of the information, and then you have the plain text. And I'm sure that's going on in the basement of every intelligence agency around the world. So that's the problem with crypto. But for all of you, your day-to-day life, you're not going to have a quantum laptop. That's not how the physics works. So good question. I'm glad you asked that. And I'm sorry, I'm probably looking at the wrong person, but it's Big Light. Nice to see you. Where do you work, by the way?
Right now, I'm independent, so I don't work. But I work.
It sounds like you're working right now, dude.
Well, yeah.
Drop me a line. I'd love to connect up with you. Like that. Yeah. Come by. Let's talk. If you're an analyst, we'll talk.
Ed, let's take a question from the online audience, then we'll go back to the in-person group here. Someone named Rolla in Montreal has asked, security by design is common sense, but how do you get management to pay attention to it?
Yeah, so that's the job, right? When you guys all know Mudge, do you know him? He was the CSO at Twitter. Do you remember? I mean, he's like a major hacker. He ran the program at ARPA. He was the guy who went to CNN and said they wouldn't listen to me. Mm-hmm. I told the CEO, we have all these vulnerabilities, they wouldn't listen. So he became a whistleblower, and he was all over the news saying, They have bad security, they're over permission, they won't listen, the board wants to do this and do that. And everybody going, oh, it's all terrible. But me and all my friends were going, yeah, and? That's the job. Like you think, here's what, like when somebody comes to the CISO position or even doing security, and I'm not giving a hard time to the person asking the question because it's a valid problem. And I'm not doing the, let's put on our big boy pants and just go do what you got to, because it's not that easy. But the job is to convince, not to just march in and you say to the boss, hey, we've got vulnerabilities in here. And they go, oh, we do? Yes. So stop the next product and stop all this marketing stuff, and everything has to be to fix these 37 vulnerabilities we found in our network infrastructure. And then the CFO goes, thank you, CSO, for saving us. That is obviously the most important thing. We're going to go do it. And then you walk out, close the door, and then they all break out laughing, think that's the funniest thing they ever saw in their life. Like I used to sit on the board of directors for a big Fortune 500 bank, and I learned that when the CISO comes in and lays something out and walks out, that has to be balanced against the next person coming in talking about a real estate problem that sounds just terrible. And then they go out and then the finance team comes in, talks about this scary thing that needs to be attended to immediately. And they walk out, and then the security, the physical security come in, talk about like these diseases, and you go, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one with risk here. Like everybody's got issues. And being a CEO means I have to integrate all that. So my advice would be not dumb it down into business terms, because that's silly. You shouldn't. The directors and CEOs and managers are smart, but you do have to put it in the context of the other things they're thinking about. So to the degree that you can climb into the head of the person you're trying to convince, and understand that they've got 10 others. Like you're one of 7 kids, and you ask mom something, and you can't understand why she says no, but then you realize, I'm asking for the car on the same day that my older sister is graduating and needs, it's like, oh, I guess I should think about what everybody else is doing before I just think about what I'm asking. So it's not dumbed down to business terms, it's understand the challenge that your managers and supervisors have. You're one piece of a very complex puzzle they have to solve every day. And when we say, yeah, I need this, and they go, no, then you go like Mudge, you go on CNN and whine. By the way, I blogged, I said, he's the only one, go look. I said, why I don't agree with Mudge's decision, and boy, did I get flamed. What? He's doing the right thing. He's telling everybody, these CEOs, they don't listen to us. And I think, you don't know the job. CISO position is an executive job. First thing I did when I became an officer, big O, is I got new golf clubs. That's literally the way to do it. I'm pretty crappy golf. I bought those Adams clubs with the big heads. Like there's no way you cannot. You step up and it's got this big Fred Flintstone club head, and you hit the thing, you don't embarrass yourself too bad.
Well, let's take the next question from the group here in New York. And so let's have another hand. Anybody else have a question? There's one from Chris here. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. First off, I appreciate you framing it as a philosophical question or a philosophical debate, because I think you're spot on and like there's no right or wrong answer. You talked about the need to kind of slow down and take more time, right? And I come from the DoD and federal executive agencies where you have a background where we're very good at going slow. And we've struggled to adopt like DevOps and agile software development and so on. So, how do you find that balance between going slow when things like the DORA report and such show that frequent deploys and iteration actually leads to more resilient software, more resilient systems, because it's like a muscle, like it atrophies if you don't use it. How do we find that balance, given there's no perfect, answer?
You're slowing down to go fast. I think that's the answer. Like you're not slowing down, you're slowing down to go fast. Like if you and I are sitting in a table somewhere here in New York City, and somebody says, hey, you and Ed, get to California. And you say, okay. And I say, okay. And you start by going on your computer to look around for flights to California. And I go, I'm not doing that. Look at this guy's barely moving. And I start running down Route 80, And I'm laughing at you going, guys sitting there planning, thinking things through. But then you automate on a plane, you fly over and you're there like, 3 weeks before I get there. So I know it's a silly example, but you get the point. Like you're slowing down to go faster. You're taking the time to plan, to build out services and platforms and approaches that will allow you to do DevOps. And again, I didn't say DevSecOps, I mean DevOps. I mean, let's do this right, let's do it properly. And I think, and Rohit, you probably agree, I think if there's one word, the secret, probably automation is probably the secret, right? You do have to figure out how to automate, but you can't just automate. Everybody in this room has had colossal disasters, haven't you? Trying to automate something without planning and doing it right. It's a disaster. But if you plan and do it right, then when you step away and you say, go, and it works, it's like the best thing you ever did. It feels great. It's going fast. It's secure. It's awesome. But you can't just dive in. You got to take the time to plan that out. So that's something I know as a practitioner, I always emphasize that because nothing comes for free. You do have to take the time to plan. It's not like you just call up Rohit and the team and say, hey, bring it in. Next week they're in. And by day 10, you've completely transformed your that's ridiculous. That never happened. But it's shorter time than you think to get a sense of how you do it, socialize it with the team. One thing you'll hear a lot about today, a theme, I'm guessing you'll hear, is this executive to developer, like having a cultural agreement that this is how we're going to do it. That takes a little time. You're not going to just flip a switch and change the culture. But once you do, man, if you go to some of these companies that have automation working properly, like in the context of our work in climate science, we're starting to look at Industry 4.0, like these manufacturing companies. It's like next gen OT. And you go and you look at what they do, and it's all automated. It's incredible. A little depressing. I was on a call 2 minutes ago with the CISO of a very large financial, and she's in Belgium. And she goes, and I told her, hey, I'm giving a keynote here in a little bit. And she goes, yeah, well, I got to go too because my robot lawn thing, I got to go. And I go, you're what? She goes, I got one of those little iMows. And it cuts the lawn all day long. The lawn is always perfect. And I went, for the last 40 years, I'm always mad when the lawn isn't good. I love when it's just cut. But then I hate when the guys didn't come yet, and I have people coming over. And she goes, no, it cuts all the time. And I went, you've automated that. That's fantastic, like a stupid lawnmower from this morning. But that's exciting when you adopt that cultural sort of change to slow down to go faster and to think hard to make things more secure. So I'm sure you'll hear those. I bet those themes will come up today.
That's the message I'll take from your talk, definitely, the slow down and go fast. This next one kind of relates to that. It's from the online group. So from your interactions with many companies, how many are jumping on the shift left bandwagon? Really, that's how prevalent is this mindset?
Yeah, I think I don't want to call it bandwagon. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you probably need to just balance. You're not going to throw out your EDR. Don't do that. But I think the title we put here, and I sort of discussed it with the team here, have we shifted too far right? That's the question. And I think we have. If you ask me, I didn't want to just give you an answer. I'd rather you have your own. But I kind of think we have. I think you need a nice balance. I think you need to bring things back. If you look at NIST 2.0, the CSF 2.0, they added that govern thing. I think that's good. It's more good than bad, right? Govern is intended to sweep across the whole life cycle. That's why they drew it. The PowerPoint chart has the inner little thingy. I don't know what color it is. I'm colorblind. But that's a big beef I have with NIST, by the way, that everything's color-coded, and I'm colorblind. I think I'm outraged at that almost. But so the govern thing emphasizes the life cycle, so that's one thing I do like. Here's one thing I wish they'd done more of. If you add up all the subcategories, I think they went down 2, which is good. But I wish they'd gone down 20. I wish that they'd made, any of you NIST hackers here dealing with it? It's too big. 800-53 is a big monster. And now I have to learn all the examples and all the resources. It's like, oh man, it's a lot of work to do GRC nowadays. But I think that's an example. Like, it's not so much bandwagon and how many are doing it. I'm hoping that most businesses realize you need nice balance, and at this point you should do everything that's reasonable in a shift left sort of context to prevent things from happening. But inevitably, you're going to have problems, and you do need to plan for it. That's why you buy fire insurance, in addition to doing everything you can to avoid a fire. You don't, like, I got a cousin who has diabetes, and I go sit by the pool with this guy, kind of heavy set guy. He's eating like ring dings and ho-hos. I'm going, dude, you got diabetes, take a shot. Like, that's the ultimate shift right. Like, the hell with it. I eat a damn ring ding, and then I just, I can fix it on the back end. The Ozempic is like that too, right? You whatever you're on, just take a drug and you'll be thin. Like, I know that's not right. I don't know when, but like people's ears are going to be falling off or something. Something bad comes from that. I have no idea what. But when things get out of balance, then it's not right. In cyber, I think you'll hear today that bringing things more in balance makes sense, right? That's what a philosopher would say, balance things, right? So,
Okay. You can't plan these metaphors that Ed comes up with, can you? They're priceless. Let's get another one from the online group here. Any more hands? Okay, one more here. We'll get a microphone to the...
that's a very active corner.
It is. I wonder. That's the corner, isn't it? We're going to challenge this corner over here
All
next.
the coffee's over there. Nobody got any.
Go ahead.
So my question got answered, but Professor Ed, good to see you again. I do have a comment and a complaint. So I'm a student of Professor Ed, and my first cyber class in my second master's was with Professor Ed. And I became an adjunct professor later on as well. And I do remember in 2011, I was teaching at FTU, and I gave my students a paper to write on blockchain security. I said, pick up anything on blockchain security.
2011?
Yes, sir.
Good for you.
Okay, so that's where my complaint is. You understand where I'm going with it. So one kid, I don't remember his name, but I remember his face. He said, Professor Kumar, I do want to buy this Bitcoin. Can you help me? I said, I don't believe it's a technology. It's not a currency. You should not buy that. But he did not listen to me. He spent all his father's money, $6,000, to buy Bitcoin. I have not received a thank you card, and you did not teach me philosophy in that class.
Well, he
that I
might have
took with
wrote
you.
that thing down too, right? You never know what could have happened. It all depends which part of the roller coaster he got off on. But
Still, the point you made about philosophy, yes, philosophy is required because you have to think in the bigger perspective on how things can pan out.
as you know, blockchain is this thing that most of you would say, wow, it's like this recent cool thing. Well, it was invented, the patent was 1976 at IBM. 1976, yes, they invented the concept of chaining blocks. There it is, you can read it. Like, you think, wow, so I have graduate students reading that old stuff to understand Bitcoin. So reading something from 1976. Again, in a computing context, when was the last time your engineering professor had you read something from 1976? They would think that's ridiculous. That's old, irrelevant stuff, but it's not. If you don't study that, you don't kind of get where it came from. So, yeah, so nice to see you. Still teaching?
Got too busy.
Okay. Well, when you get less busy, you get back. It's a nice call. Good to see you.
Ed, we're coming up on time. I just wanted to thank you. This was great. Appreciate all the historical context, especially.
Good.
So let's all thank Ed. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.